Good morning.
See who else is. Good morning. Okay, so we've been learning sort of like jumped from the laws of Lulav to the laws of Shemitah now. I mean, not completely jumped. We're connecting it to Lulav, the laws of Esrog and Lulav that are Shemitah, Lulav, and Esrog. But we're getting ourselves into the additional laws of Shemitah, and it does take up over here 2 pages. So we learned the Mishnah. This all started with the Mishnah on page 39a, where it talked about buying a Shemitah esrog, which is a problem. It didn't seem to be a problem buying a Shemitah lulav. It was a problem buying a Shemitah esrog. The question is, why is that? Why was it not a problem of buying a Shemitah lulav? So the Gemara said that, well, a Shemitah lulav, it's not an issue, not because you never have such a thing, but because the case of the Mishnah is talking about a situation where you're going to have an esrog that is a Shemitah esrog. And if the esrog is a Shemitah esrog, probably the lulav is a 6th-year lulav. Why is that? Because if the esrog is a Shemitah esrog, it means that it finished growing and it was harvested. The esrog is harvested in the 7th year. So chances are that the lulav emerged as a fruit, as a branch. When did it emerge? Probably in the 6th year. In other words, if we're dealing with the 8th year, so then maybe the lulav would be a problem, because the lulav originally emerged in the 7th year. That's called the Shemitah year. And now you're using it on the 8th year. That would be a problem. The esrog wouldn't be a problem because you harvested it in the 8th year, but the lulav would then be a problem. And now we're dealing with the esrog is the problem. The lulav is not a problem, because the lulav, whenever you use an esrog in a lulav, the esrog is going to be considered the latest year because it goes by the harvesting when it's completely when it's gathered, and the lulav is going to go by the chanota, the emergence of when it grew into a branch. So it's always going to be a year off. If the esrog is a Shemitah problem, the lulav is a 6th-year lulav. If the esrog is an 8th-year esrog, then the lulav might be a problem. It would be a 7th-year lulav. So basically, it's going to boil down to, there's going to be a difference between the lulav and the esrog with regard to what year we're gonna consider them. And the reason is because they go by different criteria. They have a different rule. The lulav, at least the way our Gemara understands the Mishnah. How is our Gemara understanding the Mishnah? Doesn't go by not everyone agrees in the Gemara about these laws, but the way our Mishnah holds is that the esrog is going to go by when it is harvested and when it's gathered, and the lulav is going to be go by when it emerged as a branch. When did that branch emerge? The lulav branch, and that's what
Rabbi,
it. Yes,
if we're talking about produce, so this esrog, a person could say they may eat it because
right,
it's a fruit, but lulav, who's eating a lulav?
right. So you have now just merited to come up with the Gemara's question. And we did touch on it yesterday, and that is the question the Gemara asks, and that is, does a lulav have the laws of Shemitah? The Gemara says, seemingly, it's a piece of wood, right? The Gemara asks? Eight amai. Why is this? Eitzim bialmahu. This is a piece of wood. This is on page 40a, about 12 lines down from the top. So your question is the Gemara's question, and that is really the topic of today's Gemara that we're going to be dealing with. we touched on it at the end of yesterday's class. So anyway, so that's a good question. We'll have to deal with that soon. Does a lulav have laws of Shemitah? The Gemara initially seems to understand that it does, because the Gemara says, "Ihachi lulav nami," the lulav also should have a problem of Shemitah. So the Gemara initially does sound like it believes there's a problem with a lulav. That's a Shemitah lulav. That's on page 39b. On 40, the Gemara asks the opposite direction. A lulav? Does a lulav have any laws of Shemitah? Where does a lulav? A lulav is a branch. It's not the fruit of a tree. Why does that have the holiness of the Shemitah holiness of the fruits? So that's the on page 40. That's the way the Gemara is coming. On page 39b, the Gemara seems to ask from a different angle and understands that a lulav does have the laws of Shemitah. The commentaries and the commentaries do ask this question, like, why does the Gemara initially assume one way and then it like assumes the other way? What changed in between the two Gemaras? Did anything actually change in the way that, because of different things that were stated in the Gemara? Did that make the Gemara change its understanding? In other words, what is the logical thing? Should a lulav have the laws of Shemitah or not? The laws of Shemitah are that certain holiness that affects the fruits of Shemitah. Does that mean that the branches also would have that? Is that something logical? We should assume yes, or we should assume not? And the Gemara seems to, at one place, assumes one way, and the other place it seems to assume the other way. Which way is the more logical way? So the commentaries do struggle to understand why the Gemara switches, and without like giving us any information of why it's switching. You know, the Gemara can switch. That's not surprising. But normally there'll be a reason why the Gemara switches. In the middle, the Gemara comes up with something new, and then it says, "Oh, based on that new information, now we have to assume the opposite." That would make sense. But here, like, what changed in the meantime, in the interim, that would cause the Gemara to switch its assumptions? Okay, so in any event, so what the Gemara, the way the flow of the Gemara was that the Gemara initially told us about this issue of the Shemitah Esrog issue, and then the Gemara mentioned the reason behind it, which has to do with giving Shemitah fruits to a person who's not so careful about the laws of Shemitah, and there's a limit of shalosh su'udais, and that the 3 meals worth, the amount that it costs for, because just, you know, that would be like an amount that he might need for Shabbos, and that's basically the rule, that you're allowed to give him up to that amount. But after that, we are concerned, the way Rashi understands it, we're concerned that he won't use up these items for during the Shemitah period, during the time frame that you're allowed to. And again, what does that mean? What does that mean? So the Am Haaretz, the regular person who's not so careful about mitzvahs, he's going to sell you an esrog. You're going to pay him $50. He's got that $50. What are we concerned about? So what we're concerned about is, if he goes and buys with that $50, he goes and buys apples, so no problem. He can now take that $50, he bought apples with it, and the apples he'll consume within the time frame that you need to consume the fruits of Shemitah. That would be the Shemitah produce of the Shemitah produce of apples are up to a certain time when apples are available in the field, and that time is the time frame where you have to eat the Shemitah apples. So if you bought apples with this money, that apples will take on the holiness of Shemitah, and you consume it. What about if you keep that money, the $50, and you save it? That's a problem, because Shemitah food has to be consumed. You can't save it after the time that it's supposed to be disposed of. And so that's what, according to Rashi, the issue is. Tosis has a different issue, and the issue that Tosis has is that you're going to take that $50 and you're going to pay a cleaning lady with it. You're not allowed to pay a cleaning lady with Shemitah money. You could buy fruit with it. You buy other items that are used for pleasure, but you can't pay your cleaning lady. You can't pay your eved, your slave. You can't buy your slave. You can't all different types of things that are not allowed with Shemitah. And you're going to take that $50. You're going to use it. So that is the issue that we're concerned about. The Gemara says that issue only applies if it's more than three meals worth. So whatever the cost of a meal is, in those days, or whatever in the era that you're doing this business deal, whatever the cost of 3 meals is, that's the maximum that we could give an am ha'aretz. And the Gemara asked a kind of question because we had a brisa that didn't seem to have that limit of 3 meals, and the Gemara concludes that there is such a limit of 3 meals. The Gemara says there's also another limit, and that is if you're taking from a field that is not mufker, that it's not ownerless. People are obligated to make their fields ownerless on Shemitah. If they don't, then you're not allowed to buy from the produce of a field that was not made ownerless. It's called mashumer. It's guarded, a guarded field. It says even a chatzi iser is usher, which could mean anything, even a tiny amount is usher, or it could mean literally even only that amount, a half a iser. Maybe if it's less than that, maybe it would be permissible. Again, that was a discussion in the commentaries. To what extent does the Gemara mean when it says even this amount is prohibited? Does it mean even a minute amount in any amount? Or does it specifically mean that literally that amount, but less than that would be permissible? And we spoke a little about that possibly if it's a rabbinic decree, there could be a permit if it's less than that amount. If it's a biblical decree, then it would seem that it would apply in all cases. You're not allowed to benefit from such a field that's totally guarded. In any event, that was the question that the Gemara had asked was from this source, and the conclusion was that there's a limit of three meals amount value. So now the Gemara then asks the question about the lulav. Why is it only a problem with the esrog? It should be a problem with the lulav. And what was the Gemara's answer? The Gemara's answer was that the esrog and the lulav are two separate entities. One is going, whenever one is going to be permissible, the other might be prohibited. Whenever one is prohibited, the other is going to be permissible, meaning they follow a different year. The esrog is always going to be 1 year, and the lulav is always going to be a year behind it, because the esrog goes by lakita, which is the gathering and the harvesting, and the lulav is always going to go by chanota, the emergence when that branch emerged. So it's always going to be, whenever you're using two things, these two items, the lulav and the esrog is going to be current, and the lulav is going to be old because it's going by when that branch emerged, not when you now took it, but it's when it emerged. So it's and Sukkot is always on the 15th day after Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is day 1 of Tishrei, and Sukkot is the 15th day of Tishrei. So it's always right by the new year. And so ultimately, you're always going to have an esrog that's a current year esrog, and a lulav that's that's from the previous. It's going to be from the previous year. Generally, that's the way it's going to work, or it's easy for it to work that way, which could mean, and some commentaries mention this, that our Mishnah chose a case of esrog where the esrog is a problem, but the lulav is not a problem to sell. The esrog is a problem to sell. But really, the Mishnah could have chosen a case where the lulav is a problem to sell and the esrog isn't a problem to sell. What would that case be? If it was the 8th year. In the 8th year, the esrog, you'll say, is an 8th year esrog because you just harvested it and it's now the 8th year. And the 8th year doesn't have a Shemitah problem. So the esrog is permissible to sell. It's not a Shemitah esrog. But the lulav would be a Shemitah lulav because it emerged during the 7th year. So you could have the opposite problem if we spoke about the next year. the Mishnah chose this case, but it could have theoretically, you can learn from the case that the Mishnah chose to the other law about the other case. That's one way of explaining why the Mishnah chose this and not the opposite case. The opposite case would be in the 8th year. You could have a case where the esrog is an 8th year esrog, which is not a Shemitah problem, and the lulav would be a Shemitah problem. And what would you do in such a case? You would tell the seller, listen, man, I'm buying the esrog for $100 and give me the lulav as a gift. You know, and the lulav was a problem. You can't buy it, but you could get it as a gift. So that is the way the Gemara. Now the Gemara is not automatically agreeable to this distinction, and the reason the reason why the Gemara is not agreeable to this initially is because there seem to be a lot of different. There's other rabbis that argue about what is the date, what is the cutoff date for the esrog tree, and the cutoff date or the rules of the esrog tree. It could be different regarding Meiser and regarding Shemitah. Meaning, regarding Meiser, it might be called this year fruit. Regarding Shemitah, it might be called a different fruit, a different year's fruit produce. What does that mean? So the Gemara brings Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer. What do they say? So the first opinion that the Gemara brings here on page 39b is Rabban Gamliel's opinion. What is that opinion? That opinion is that an esrog has certain things that it's similar to a tree, 3 things. And in one thing, it's similar to a vegetable. How is it similar to a tree? Number one, what does trees have that vegetables don't have? Trees have a law that you have to keep arla. The first 3 years, you're not allowed to eat the produce. What about a vegetable? Would you be allowed to eat the produce of a vegetable in the first 3 years? Yes, there's no such law of arla, especially because vegetables have to be replanted every year. If there was a law of arla, you would never be able to eat any vegetables because every year you got to replant it. So every year is the first year of the vegetable. So vegetables do not have a law of arla, which naturally means they don't have the law of Retiree, the 4th year produce, because the 4th year produce, again, would only be if it's lasted for 4 years. And if vegetables are replanted every year, you don't have arla because it's it can't be. You would never be able to eat vegetables if there was a law of arla. And the 4th year, there's no such thing as a 4th year because you're replanting it every year. So you don't have Retiree, the 4th year where you're supposed to bring the fruits into Jerusalem and to rejoice over Hashem and thank him for the fruits that you have for the new produce for the 4th year that you're finally allowed to eat it. You rejoice with Hashem and thanking him for the land that he gave us. And he took us out of Egypt and gave us the land of Eretz Yisrael and so on. And that's what you are thanking Hashem in the 4th year. Now, you don't have that with vegetables. So what about an esrog? So it says that an esrog has similarities to, in some sense, to a vegetable, but not this. But it is also similar to a tree. Of course, it looks like a tree, an esrog. So in what sense is it similar to a tree? There's the laws of arla. There's laws of Retiree. You have the 4th year law. You have the first 3 years law of an esrog tree. An esrog tree, you can't benefit from the fruit the first 3 years. In the 4th year, you have to take the fruits into Jerusalem and rejoice with Hashem in over over these fruits, and that's the 4th year. So an esrog is similar to a tree. What about the 3rd law that is similar to a tree? What is the additional law that it's similar to a tree? It's similar to a tree regarding Shemitah. L'shvius. Now, what does that mean? Vegetables also have laws of Shemitah. So what is it similar to a tree regarding Shemitah? So the answer is it's similar to a tree that other trees go by the emergence of the fruit. When the fruit emerges, that's the date. That's what year it is. What year did the fruit emerge? So the same thing will be an esrog tree according to Rabban Gamliel. Again, we're talking about Rabban Gamliel. He says the esrog, we want to say from our Mishnah, it implied that an esrog and a lulav are going to be different. The esrog is going to be going after when it's harvested, and the lulav goes by when it emerges. Rabbi Gamliel doesn't say that. And that's what the Gemara is bothered with. Rabbi Gamliel says that the esrog is similar to a tree regarding Shemitah. It goes by when the fruit emerged. So the 7th year, Shemitah year, you're taking your lulav and esrog, you're buying a lulav and esrog for the 7th year. Guess what? That esrog, according to Rabbi Gamliel, is really a 6th year esrog. It's not a Shemitah esrog. You can buy it on Shemitah. Why? Because it emerged as a fruit in the 6th year, and according to Rabbi Gamliel, that's what it goes by. Even though you harvested it now, right by after Rosh Hashanah, but you had emerged in the 6th year. That's when it's considered a 6th year. That makes it considered a 6th year produce, and it's not a Shemitah esrog. And you can buy it outright, pay the full price, and give it to the Am Haaretz. Let him have the money, and he can save it. He doesn't have to use it on Shemitah on things that are gonna. He can save the money. That's fine because it's not a Shemitah esrog. And so that is the law, according to Rabban Gamliel, that the esrog goes by chanata. It goes by the emergence of when it emerged as a fruit. How is it similar to a yerek then? In what sense is it similar to a vegetable that you go by the year that it's harvested? That the year that it's harvested, based on that year, that's the rule of Meiser. So Rashi's example is you harvested it in the 3rd year, but it emerged in the 2nd year. What Meiser do you give for this esrog tree? The esrog tree is similar to a vegetable in one sense, that the Meiser goes by the year that it is harvested. It goes by the year it's harvested. Now, Rashi doesn't say this, but something that I've been thinking about is what happens if you harvested the esrog in the 8th year, which basically means the 1st year of the new Shemitah cycle. And according to Rabban Gamliel, this is called a Shemitah esrog because it is Shemitah produce. It would end up something very interesting here, where you have Shemitah produce that you're taking Meiser from. Because according to Rabban Gamliel, it could have 2 different rules. Regarding Shemitah, it's called a Shemitah esrog because it emerged in the 7th year. And you harvested it in the 8th year, which means the 1st year to the new Shemitah cycle. So it's now called a 1st year fruit regarding Meiser, regarding tithings. So you have a Shemitah fruit that you're actually taking Meiser from, according to Rabban Gamliel. I'm just like thinking about this. It sounds strange because normally Shemitah produce you don't take Meiser from, but this would be a sort of a contradictory situation where you would have a case where something is going to be tithed, even though it's a Shemitah tithing. So I have to look into that, how that would work, and does he really hold that? And maybe Rashi specifically speaks about the case of the 2nd year and the 3rd year. Maybe he would agree that because it's a Shemitah fruit, maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. It's a maybe he would allow you not to maybe it would be a different rule, or is that the case, or is that what he holds, that you would actually would you actually take Meiser from this Shemitah fruit? Again, the esrog tree is an abnormal situation. It has, in a certain sense, it's like a tree, but as Rabban Gamliel says, there is in one sense, it's like a vegetable. And we explained that it's based on the fact that it grows on water it grows on extra irrigation, which makes it more similar to vegetables than trees. So anyway, that would be a question that I'm in the midst of working out and seeing if any commentaries talk about it. But in any event, this is what Rabban Gamliel holds, which again doesn't fit our Mishnah. And then Rabbi Eliezer totally doesn't fit our Mishnah because Rabbi Eliezer says an esrog tree is a tree. You don't compare it to a vegetable at all. It's totally similar to a tree, and everything follows the laws of trees. And the laws of trees, it goes by the emergence of the esrog goes by the emergence of when the fruit emerged as a fruit, which basically means that it doesn't go by when it's harvested. So nothing seems to fit with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah, we're understanding, is it's going by when it's harvested, and that's why the esrog could be different than the lulav. But if you're going by the chanota, if you're going by the emergence of a fruit, then it would end up that the esrog and the lulav would be in the same ballpark, in the same category, the same rule, and you'd have a problem. The Mishnah's solution wouldn't work because the whole solution of the Mishnah is based on the fact that one of them is a 7th year and the other produce is a 6th year, and therefore it works to make a solution where you buy one and you include the money for the other. That or you buy one and you get the other for free is the Mishnah's case. The Gemara was you include the money in the other. But basically, how are we understanding the Mishnah if the law is that it goes by, that the esrog goes by chanata, just like other trees? The esrog regarding Shemitah, it goes by the emergence and not by when it's harvested. So the Gemara says, guess what? Now it's interesting, the term of the Gemara. The Gemara often uses this term when it finds, you know what, we found one opinion. Who the Amar ki haitana, he holds like we found like an opinion that the Mishnah must be going like, and it's going like this one opinion that we weren't so familiar with. Here, our Gemara actually doesn't mean that. He's going like this Tana. Who's this Tana? It's the rabbis, the majority view. It's interesting the Gemara uses that term, ki haitana. Who the Amar ki haitana? He follows this Tana. So who is this this Tana? So it's the rabbi's view. The rabbi's view is that you follow for Meiser and for Shemitah, an esrog follows the laws that it goes by harvesting. That's what the Gemara That's what the Gemara answers to our Mishnah, that he's following this this opinion. Now, the reason why it says this one opinion, I guess it's because Rabbi Yossi is saying this. Rabbi Yossi is quoting the rabbis. Rabbi Yossi says, Avtulma says this, and the rabbis said that. So in other words, our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yossi, who's quoting the Thomas, and he's quoting the rabbis he's quoting the rabbis that were in Usha, that they convened and came up with this conclusion that esrog goes by when it's gathered and harvested, and that would make our Gemara be understandable, or our Mishnah. This would be a good answer, good explanation for our Mishnah, that our Mishnah can now be understood because we have the lulav case the lulav goes by when it emerges, the esrog goes by when it's harvested, and everything will fit now, everything flows. So that's the conclusion of this, of explaining our Mishnah, really. And the Gemara, where we're up to over here, Taima the lulav Barshishis. Let's start over here. Maybe we did a little further yesterday, but let's start over here on page 40a. We're going to start with the word Taima. This is maybe 11 lines or 12 lines from the top of the page. Let's see, 5, 10. Yeah, I think it's 11 lines from the top of the page. Page 40A. Okay. Taima delulav bar shishis hanichnos l'shviyas. The reason why our Mishnah has a solution where the lulav doesn't have the holiness of Shemitah, even though the esrog does, is because the lulav is really called a 6th year lulav. It's called a lulav bar shishis, a lulav of 6 years. Hanichnas l'shviyasu, which entered the 7th year, but it's called the 6th year lulav. It happens to be now the Shemitah year, so it entered the 7th year, but because it emerged in the 6th year, so it is called a 6th year lulav, and it entered the 7th year, and that's why the Mishnah can be understood that the lulav doesn't have the holiness of Shemitah fruit and Shemitah produce, and therefore you could actually sell the lulav. Hadeshvias, but if it would be a 7th year lulav, for example, if this was the 8th year of the Shemitah cycle, which means the 1st year of the new Shemitah cycle, then what would end up happening is that this would be called a Shemitah lulav. Hadeshvias kadosh. So the Gemara says, if it was Shemitah, if it was a 7th year lulav, would it actually be holy? So the reason why it's not holy is because it's really a 6th year. Hadeshvias kadosh. If it was a 7th year, it would be holy? The Gemara says, "Amai," but why is that? Eitzim bialmahu. It's only wood. This is David's question. It's only wood, and ve'eitzim ein bahen mishum kedusha shvius. In wood, there is no holiness of Shemitah. It's just wood, just a branch. So what would be the problem? The whole problem doesn't start in the first place. The Tanya, because it was taught in a brisa, ale konim vale gefanim, the leaves of reeds and the leaves of vines, shegivavan lechuba pnei asoda, they were gathered and brought into in order to bring them into a some type of a storage for the winter. So basically, they are used sometimes for animal food, and sometimes they're used for heating up the ovens. So the brisa clarifies and says, "Liktan la." It depends what you harvested it for. If you gathered it, liktan la achila. If you gathered it for eating purposes, for the animal to eat, so it's yesh bahen mishum kedusha shvius. They actually will be considered to have the holiness of Shemitah produce, just like other fruits are fit to eat. This is also considered produce of Shemitah, and even though it's they're leaves and they're not, people don't eat them, but animals do. And so it's meant for, if it's meant for animal food, it has kedusha shvius, it has the holiness. Liktan la'etim, but if you harvested it and gathered it, liktan, for you gathered it for the wood, then meaning to burn. So ein b'hem mishum kedusha shvius, it doesn't have the holiness of Shemitah. And the reason, the point that because the reason you're burning it is to heat up your oven, and basically that is not a chila. It's not considered eating it. It's burning it, but it's not eating it. So the same thing should apply to Gemara's understanding. The same thing should apply to a lulav. What is a lulav used for? not to eat. You're not eating the lulav. An animal doesn't eat the lulav. So therefore, the lulav should not be holy with Shemitah holiness. This is David's question, the Gemara's question. So the Gemara answers, Shani hasam damakra lachem liyachla, that it's different. Wood that's used for an oven is not going to have the holiness of Shemitah, but a lulav will. That's what the Gemara's answer is. Shani hasam, that's different. By the wood that is being used for fire, that won't have the holiness of Shemitah. Damar Kra, because the pasuk says lachem liyachla, it's for you to eat, and that it's meant lachem, and it's meant liyachla. It's meant for you, and it's meant for eat. And what the way the Gemara understands it, the Brisa understands that it says these two words is lachem dumya de liyachla, that it's yours, similar to liyachla, similar to the eating. That the heter, the permit to use this for benefits is anything similar to eating. Again, it says these two words. On the one hand, it says lachem, which sounds like you use it for anything you want. And on the other hand, it says liachla for eating. Now, if it just wanted you to eat it, it should just say lachla. If it wanted you to use any of your benefits, it should just say lachem. It says lachem and liachla. So the understanding is that it's lachem, that it's for you, and it's liachla to compare the two. That what does that mean? That it's lachem dumya de liachla, that you compare your benefit, your needs, you're using it for your benefits, and the eating benefit, the enjoyment of eating. That what is, in what way is it similar? That it has to be, all of your benefits have to be similar to the way things that you eat. That it's used, or it becomes holy. You can use Shemitah fruit when it's used in a way that it's similar to what happens with fruit that's eaten. What happens? Well, when it's consumed, so the benefit that you have for enjoying this fruit that you're eating and the destruction of that fruit all come at the same time. As you're chewing it, you're enjoying it, and you're destroying it. It all comes at the same time. The same thing applies to drinking. While you're drinking it, you're ruining it for future use, and you're enjoying it. The same thing applies to sicha, anointing. You're smearing yourself with it. It now is no longer fit for anything else. It's being used, and you're enjoying the smearing of it on your skin. In the hadlakas haner, would be a case of lighting it for flame, for a light. So you're using it for a light. So you're enjoying while it's being consumed, so to speak, and not eaten, but consumed of, while the fire is consuming it. That's when you're getting your benefit. So the same thing would apply, but in two senses. That number one, items that are called consumed, benefited and consumed at the same time. Number one, put everyone here. Number one, such items have the kedusha shvius. They are considered holy with the holiness of Shemitah. In number two, you're allowed to use Shemitah produce for those type of benefits. So it's really two laws that we're learning out of this idea. In other words, the laws of Shemitah have two rules. One is what actually gets the holiness of Shemitah. And number two, what are you allowed to use something that's holy with Shemitah? What do you use it for? And they both fall into the same category. Lachem liyachla basically teaches us both that anything that's lachem liyachla, that fits those two terms, lachem and liyachla, which we compare to each other, and we say it has to be beneficial, and it has to be similar benefit as eating it, that it gets consumed. While you're benefiting from it, the item gets consumed of. So anything that's similar to those two things, number one, has the holiness of Shemitah to it, and number two, will also be allowed to be used in that way during Shemitah, as a Shemitah produce. You're allowed to use it for that. for that type of purpose. You can't use it for anything. You can't just use Shemitah fruit for anything you want. But if it's being used for something that you're consuming of, it's being consumed of, and you're benefiting at the same time, that would be okay. Now, what comes out of this? So it says Yotzu, this excludes eitzim wood that's used for cooking, wood used for cooking. Why? Because when do you benefit from the wood and when does the wood get consumed of? The wood gets consumed of right when it's burned, and the benefit is really when it gets charcoaled and when the wood gets burnt up into coals, shana osan achar biyurad. So they're excluded because the benefit is really after. When do you cook the food? It's after they become coals. That's when you really get the benefit. And the burning is already done before. The burning is done first, and the benefit is after they become coals and you cook. That's when you get the benefit from it. So are you allowed to use Shemitah? Would you be allowed to use Shemitah items to cook food with by burning these items in order to cook food? No. Would wood take on the holiness of wood used for cooking? Would that take on the holiness of Shemitah? No. So what about a lulav? So a lulav, what is a lulav used for? Well, before we do lulav, let's just think for a moment. We spoke about wood used for animal food. Animal food is beneficial while it's being consumed. So animal food would have the holiness of Shemitah, and that's what you would, it would actually take on that holiness. Yesh bahen kedusha shvius. It would have holiness. If it's lipton la'achila, you took these leaves, it's not exactly wood, leaves that animals are going to be eating, that's considered holiness, considered Shemitah produce. Because you harvested it for food, that's called Shemitah. It's going to be eaten by the animals, going to benefit from it while it's being consumed. What about if you used it you harvested these leaves in order to burn, to cook your food? Then it's not going to have the holiness of Shemitah. Ein bahen mishum kedusha shvis. It doesn't have the holiness of Shemitah. Now comes the piece of lulav. Just one second. Now let's just connect it. Apply this to lulav. So the lulav is really used as a broom. Now, so you're harvesting lulavs, and the main use of a lulav is brooms. And so if that's the stam use of a lulav, so they in the olden days, nowadays we don't use it as brooms because we have better brooms. But in the olden days, they would use lulavs as brooms. And so if so, is the benefit at the same time that the broom is getting ruined? Is the broom getting consumed, sort of like ruined, while you're benefiting? Yes, because while you're sweeping up the mess, you're enjoying that, and the broom is getting consumed of, so to speak. It's getting diminished. It's getting ruined. So the consumption is at the same time as the benefit. And therefore, a lulav, does it have the holiness of Shemitah? Yes. A lulav has the holiness of Shemitah if it's emerged in the 7th year. If it's emerged in the 6th year, it's not the holiness of Shemitah. But if it emerged in the 7th year, it would have the holiness of Shemitah. Yesterday, I was thinking that maybe the lulav, if you say you're shaking it for the mitzvah, you're using it for a lulav. So I was thinking, well, while you're shaking it, it's getting ruined, and you're benefiting from it. So would that be good enough? But the more I think about it, it's not, because there's a concept in the Gemara that mitzvahs lav lahanis nitnu. So you're not benefiting from it. So it's not called lachem liyachla. This is not a benefit. You're doing a mitzvah, but you don't. But mitzvahs are not to benefit from. I don't know if you could say that. I didn't see any commentaries mention that. So the commentaries mention this idea about the broom. That it's used as a broom, and that's why a lulav would have the laws of Shemitah, because it's used as a broom. The fact that you're using it as a lulav, that doesn't seem to make it work. I was hoping to push that, but it didn't seem to be accepted. So we can't go by that. And I think the reason why is because you don't really call that benefit. That's a spiritual thing. This is mitzvahs are not then that's not a physical benefit, and so I guess you can't go by that. Jeffrey, you want to say
Yeah.
something?
Yes, the Gemara certainly told us that there's a benefit of keeping away the bad winds or spirit.
Right.
So several different. So maybe
Uh-huh.
that's their formulation for
A little push. You want to push my thought. So you do have a
I
physical.
think the whole idea that it says ulakachtem lachem, just like it says in the other passage about Shemitah, it says
Lachem liachla.
So
Uh-huh.
but anyhow, clearly it's an intermediate category. But by the way, nowadays, Oleg Geffen, we eat them. Human beings eat them.
Right.
Okay, and we also eat the pulp of the lulav.
Just 1 second. Let me mute everyone. Okay, yeah. Say that again.
We also eat pulp of the lulav tree.
The pulp of the lulav?
Yes, you
mean hearts of palm?
Cans. It's called
hearts of palm.
Hearts of palm.
It
may not be the same lulav exactly, but it's certainly that category. So nowadays, a lot of things have changed.
Right.
Right.
And no, the Paiskim deal with this. By the way, the Paiskim do deal with this in the Shemitah year. They deal with this. Is the lulav a problem to buy?
Right.
Does it have kedusha shvius? Because nowadays we don't use the lulav as a broom. And so therefore the Paiskim say that nowadays we don't have to worry about this issue. But in the olden days, that was an issue. It was considered Shemitah produce. Nowadays, we don't have to worry about the lulav. But so they conclude that way. Now you're mentioning that we eat grape leaves. Okay, that's fine. But what about the hearts of palm? So I guess the lulav is not where the hearts of palm is, because otherwise it could be a problem.
But if it matured, it would be. It must be from the eights.
The eights itself, fine. But the lulav itself, the lulav is not. So the lulav wouldn't have this problem. Yeah. So that would probably answer your question, that it's not that because it's not the actual the dates of palm, the hearts of palm, we'd have to look into if that has kedusha shvius.
I never heard anybody tell me what the bracha is for that.
Oh, in the Gemara in Brachas talks about it. We learned it. You should have come to our class 4 years
earlier.
But we did learn it. It's called what is it called? Kaira. And it's in the 6th parak of Brachas. It talks about it in it.
Wonderful.
And the understanding is that the hearts of palm would be ha'adama because not really the fruit.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, I remember there was a Gemara somewhere else where there was this one person who was trying to force another person to give certain objects derogatory names. And he said, call the lulav, whatever the Aramaic term was for broom.
I'd have to look it up. Yeah, it rings a bell, but I don't know. I can't remember.
I can't remember where it is either.
All right, we'll have to look it up. Yeah, remind me maybe after. We'll take a look if you want to text me after.
Rabbi.
Yes, David.
Yeah, you were saying about giving Shemitah on animal produce. Does that mean hay? You have to give Shemitah on hay for horses eat hay?
That's what it would seem like.
So you're going to be schlepping hay into the Beis Hamikdash?
No. Shemitah doesn't just means that it has certain laws about it. Doesn't mean that you bring it to Beis Hamikdash. It's not bikurim. It's not it's but it has certain laws about it. I have to look up about hay, but it sounds like it would. It sounds like lachem liachla. Yeah.
But there's a difference between what is the Araisa and what is the Rabbanan about Shemitah. Also, right? Because originally it's only the tree or the 7 species.
I think you're talking about Meiser, maybe. Meiser would be Dagan Tirash. No. But no. What would be only the Shivas Aminim? No, that's Bikurim. And Meiser, there's different opinions if it only applies to wine and oil, Midaraisa, or does it apply to all fruits? But what would be the Shivas Haminim? Midoraisa
No.
I'm not sure what you're referring to. I can't think of.
Figs, dates.
Yeah, but what would be applicable to that? Shemitah?
Yeah,
And it doesn't apply to any other tree, really? Midoraisa?
you're right.
I don't.
So I think so.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. I don't know. We live outside of Israel, so I guess we're not as
No, but we need to know because nowadays we also import fruit.
right. I'm not aware of that. That it only applies to
So,
Shiva Samim.
so they didn't have oranges, but now we take Misa from oranges.
Well, again, so regarding Meiser, there's a machlokes. If it applies, is it only Dagon Tirosh for Yitzhar for Meiser? Is it only the Tirosh wine, grapes, and Yitzhar oil and olives? Which even that is a machlokes. Does it mean the oil in the wine? And maybe midaraisa, if you just eat grapes, you would be exempt from Meiser, and it's only if you have the wine and the oil? Or does it mean even the grapes and the olives? But then there's the other opinion that says all fruit trees are obligated in Meiser, not vegetables. Vegetables would be midrabanan. But I'm not sure what you're referring to. That Shivas Haminim is the Araisa and Sa. I don't think Shemitah falls into that category. We could look it up. Okay, so so the Gemara here. Let's see what we're up to now. Coming back to so we just answered the question about the Shemitah fruit, that the lulav would actually fall into the category of Shemitah fruit. Now comes the next question, and it would basically be you would have the laws of Shemitah fruit, and therefore our Gemara needed to answer that there's a difference between the esrog and the lulav, that if the esrog is a Shemitah esrog, the lulav is a 60-year esrog. And therefore you could sell the esrog, or you could sell the lulav, but not the esrog. And then, of course, the next year, you might have the opposite problem. And, okay. Now, the Gemara asks, Va'ika eitzim demishchan. But what about wood that has like some type of a oil, and it's used for lighting? It's called the eitzim demishchan. Eitzim that have oil to them, and eitz shemen, Rashi says. So the fire, you use them for torches, and in those type of woods, you benefit the same time that it's burning. Food, you got to wait till the charcoal, till it becomes coal. But the torch, you benefit from it as it's being consumed. So in such a case, would you say? So there you have wood that it would be the hana, the benefit in their consumption is all at the same time. And why don't these woods have the laws of Shemitah? So Amar Rava says Stam eitzim lahasaka hinoindim, that even though sometimes you use these woods for lighting, for torches, and so on, that's not the common use. The common use is always for hasaka, for firing up your for burning and using it for cooking purposes and so on. And therefore, it's not to light; it's to burn. And therefore, the assumption is that that's what it's being used for, and it doesn't take on the kedushas shvius, and it won't have the kedusha. Now comes the next piece. The Gemara says, "Ve'etzim lahasaka tanoi," and the eitzim that are meant for burning, it's a machlekes tanoim. The Tanya, because it was taught in a brisa, in moishin perish shvius, we don't use the fruits of Shemitah, let's say wine, loy mishra, not for soaking flax, v'loy lechavusa, not for washing your clothes. Nowadays, of course, we use detergent. In the olden days, they had different things that would beneficial for as similar to like our detergent. One of them was wine. Wine had some type of some type of a chemical thing inside it that would cause it to cause I guess the garments to have to be cleansed. And so would you be allowed to use Perei Shvius for such a thing? So it says you can't. The Brisa says you can't do. The first opinion in the Brisa says you can't do it. Rabbi Yossi Omer Meiser, Rabbi Yossi says you would be allowed to. So the Gemara says, my time of the Tanakama, what's the reason of the first opinion? You can't use it to soak flax, and you can't use it to wash your clothes. The Amar Kwa, because the Pasuk says liachla. The Pasuk says that it's for you, as we said before, lachem liachla, it's for you to eat. And we darshan from there, v'loi, we learn from there that it's for eating and not for soaking. And not for soaking flax, v'loi lechavusa, and not for washing clothes. And what's the reason behind that? So it would be based on what we said earlier, that it's lachem liachla, that it has to be for your benefits. It knows the Gemara doesn't mean to say that you can't have any benefit from it, but it means that you have to. It's for you to benefit in ways similar to eating, which would not be soaking or washing clothes. My time at Rabbi Yossi, why does Rabbi Yossi permit it? Amar kol lachem. So he says, you know why? Because it says lachem, it's for you. And what did we learn from there? Lachem, l'chol tzarchechem, you could use it for you, for all your needs. V'afilu l'mishra, u'lechavusa, you could use it for even for soaking flax and even for washing clothes. So what comes out is that this is actually a machlokes, and of course the Gemara sounds like, well, this rabbi says, well, it says this word, and that rabbi says, well, it says that word. But what about this rabbi do? What does this rabbi do with the other word, and what does the other rabbi do with this word? So the Gemara asks these questions. But Tanakama hoksiv lachem. What is the Tanakama? The first opinion. What does he do? It says lachem. It says it's yours. Yours sounds like for any of your uses. Lachla, you're right. It sounds like for food, but lachem sounds like for anything. So why are you telling me it says liyachla only for eating and not for soak? But it also says lachem. Lachem makes it sound like it's for anything. Hahu lachem. That lachem is dumya de liyachla, as we said earlier, that it's similar to liyachla, that it has to be a type of benefit that is similar to not only eating, other benefits as well, but they have to be similar. Mishana also you'll be shava. It has to be that the hana in the biur, the benefit and the consumption of it is equal. It's at the same time. Yatsu mishra kubusa, that excludes soaking and washing, where your benefit is when the clothing is clean and you're wearing it clean, not when you wash it. If your benefit was when you wash it, that would be a benefit at the same time. But here you're ruining it. Once the wine touches the garment, it's already dirty. You ruin the one. When does it get clean and you wear it? That's when you benefit. So there you can't use it because it's not similar. You're not the consumption of the item, and the benefit is at two separate times. The benefit is much later. So it has to be similar. It has to be similar to eating, where you benefit at the same time as the food is destroyed. That's what eating is. Yatsu mishrum kubusa. Only something that the hana in the consumption is at the same time. Yatsu mishra ukvusa, that excludes mishra, ukvusa, that excludes soaking and washing. Shana asan achar biyuran, that the benefit comes after the consumption, after it's consumed. When you wear it. Rabbi Yossi haksiv liachla. What does Rabbi Yossi do? It says liachla, that it's supposed to be a benefit of eating, and you're saying you could use it for any benefit. It's liachla. So it's specifically, it says liachla, at least it'd be similar to eating or something like that. You're just you have a blanket rule. You can use these shvita fruits for anything. So it says ahumi boile. That the reason it says liachla is to teach you that it's liachla veloy lemalugma. It can't be for a malugma, for some type of a healing, some type of a cream or that's used for healing, or for some type of
cleansing.
Cleansing?
Well, meluchlach means dirty.
Some type of refuah, some type of healing. And he brings the bride. So we'll stop here. We're going to stop here to the Tanya. And Zaygus, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
You do have very commonly that not the wine was used for cleaning, but the vinegar from wine.
Right. Okay.
Especially when there were diseases, like in the 18th century in America, they washed the clothes with vinegar because of the smallpox.
Interesting. Some people wash their floor with vinegar even today.
Yeah. So
less chemicals. Right.
And the word, yes, sure, and also it dissolves organic things. But when you read the word vinegar, it has the word wine in it. So originally, see, and that's not true of Hebrew, but the original thought of the wine was that it was even useful when it got sour, when it was old. So I think that's might be what they mean by kibusa.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Very possible. Yeah. I was thinking that it doesn't mean the wine right away, but maybe after it. But the vinegar, I wasn't thinking vinegar, but yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah. All right. Shkoyach. Very good. Okay. Have a good day.
Bye bye.